In the next 30 minutes on the marketplace, Ghana's economy grew by 0.4% rate in 2020, beating most institutions and analyst forecasts. Of course, provisional figures from the Ghana Statistical Service have revealed. Also, President Akufo-Addo releases the list of deputy minister nominees as Charles Edibuahin elevated to position of Minister of State at the Finance Ministry, and Hits FM Mark Okrukumante also nominated for the position of Deputy Tourism Minister. Plus, German corporation fosters relationship with government to develop industrial parks and automotive sector. Hello once again, we have all these stories plus more coming up shortly after this break. This day. Hello and welcome. Ghana's economy grew by 0.4% rate in 2020, beating most institutions and analyst forecasts. Provisional figures from the Ghana Statistical Service have revealed. Now, the expectations were that the economy will grow at a rate of at least 1% of gross domestic product last year. According to the figures, the agri sector drove the annual GDP with a growth rate of 7.4%, while the services sector recorded a positive growth rate of 1.5%. Industry recorded negative 3.6%, and for the agri sector, the fishing sector recorded the highest year-on-year growth rate of 14.4%. In fact, that of forestry and logging, the subsector recorded the lowest with a contraction of negative 9.2%. When it comes to the information and communication subsectors, it recorded the highest year-on-year GDP growth rate of 22.5% in the services sector, while the hotel and restaurant activity subsector recorded the lowest with a contraction of 34.8%. With regards to industry, of course, the electricity subsector recorded the highest year-on-year annual growth of 7.9% for 2020, while that of the mining and quarrying subsectors recorded the lowest with a contraction of 11%. And it goes on and on. For the size of the economy, the services sector controlled 44.6% of the economy. Indeed, industry and agri constituted jointly 36.3% and 19.1% respectively. In all, the size of Ghana's economy was estimated to be 404 billion Ghana cedis. Let's put it all into perspective as we hear from the government statistician, Professor Kobna Ene.
The provisional current annual GDP estimates from an oil point of view stood at 404,873.7 million Ghana cedis. This compares with 350,788.2 million Ghana cedis that was recorded in the year 2019, indicating about 53,000. Again, excluding oil, we saw that in 2020, GDP stood at 353,705.1 million cedis, compared with 315,118.8 million Ghana cedis that was recorded in the annual year 2019, indicating an increase in excess of 35 million. From a sector point of view, again, on an annual GDP, we continue to see the services sector driving or having the highest contribution to the overall GDP by contributing 44.6%, followed by industry sector 36.3%, and agriculture 19.1%. From a basic prices point of view, on an annual basis, GDP stood at 386,880.5 million Ghana cedis, and from a purchases value point of view, GDP stood at 404,873.7 million Ghana cedis.
Well, let's put all the figures into perspective, and helping us do that is Professor Peter Korte, an economist with the Institute of Statistical, Social and Economic Research. Prof, we're so grateful that you joined us. Are you surprised that the economy grew by 0.4%?
Yes, I'm a bit surprised because we were expecting a growth of 1% to 2% for 2020. So it's a bit surprising, but not too surprised because it's the oil sector that drove this negative growth rate. If you look at oil prices on the international market, I think demand hasn't picked up as much as possible, and therefore price of oil hasn't really picked up. So that significantly affected the mining and quarrying sector growth rates, and that is what we are seeing. It has had a dampening effect on the growth of agri and the other sectors that are driving the growth process.
Well, but even though the economy has been growing consistently at a higher rate, there have been concerns that it does not count with job creation. How do you think we can ensure an inclusive growth moving forward?
I think the first thing, when we look at the numbers we are seeing, it tells you that we need to diversify our economy. We could not rely solely on one or two sectors. You've seen what oil has done as a result of COVID, as a result of global demand shifts. Therefore, we need to certainly diversify our products. And the other thing we have to do is to add value. We ought to process more of whatever we produce. And that will significantly help in the job creation we are talking about. If we process and add more value, then we can pay more people, we can employ more people, and that will ensure that the growth is distributed. But let's also be reminded that there's no economy, no market economy where when you grow, everybody gets a fair share of the national cake. There has to be conscious effort to redistribute the growth. And that is why policies like the LEAP and many other government interventions are necessary to ensure that growth is redistributed for everybody to benefit.
Taking a closer look at the figures once again, we realize that the agri-sector continues to contribute significantly to the economy over the last 2 years. Are you surprised looking at the fact that it contributed about 8.2% to GDP?
Sorry, say that again.
I'm saying, considering the sector, it grew by 8.2% to GDP. What's your response to this jump in growth?
Yes, we have seen agri has been very resilient to COVID. I mean, if you look at the growth rates so far, even from the first quarter of 2020 to date, you will see agri growing at very good, decent rates. It also boils down to government policy, the planting for food and jobs, and the other agricultural policies that has helped to sustain agricultural growth. But again, it's one of the sectors that has been very resilient to COVID-19. I mean, no matter what happens, people have to eat.
Exactly.
People have to consume agricultural products. So it's certainly resilient. The next step, or what for me would be very good, is for us to process agricultural products, find storage, and also look at the whole value chain of agriculture so that we add value right from seed to the final output. We ought to integrate the value chain and ensure that we always add value, we process. But when there's a glut, prices fall. And then when the lean season, the price of agricultural products go up. That does not help farmers or businesses to plan. We need to move beyond that cycle.
So we now have a clear picture of how 2020 looked like, a growth of 0.4%. But looking into 2021, with the easing of restrictions, vaccines coming on board, investor climate looking bright, how do you describe the prospects for this year?
Well, I see bright prospects. I mean, if you look at even last quarter of 2020, you see the growth numbers picking up. You find that for the oil sector, growing at about 3-point-something%. Then the non-oil sector growing at 4.5% in the last quarter of 2020. It tells you that now that we are opening up the economy gradually, and also we coming in of the vaccine, that is if we get our second dose and make sure we get herd immunity, we are likely to grow at a much faster pace than we're doing currently. So for me, I think the prospects are high, and I think every investor should be happy to engage in Ghana and engage with the economy to ensure that we drive growth, we employ more people, and improve livelihood.
You have shared so much poignant suggestions on how to remain resilient, Professor, but any advice to government on the policy proposals to maintain and even improve on the climate in the medium to long term?
I think the cost of doing business is very key to every investor, and stable electricity supply is one, and stable and affordable electricity supply is one. The utilities will have to be stable in terms of quality of service as well as pricing. the investor climate looks good. Our inflation rates, our macroeconomic targets, some look good, but I think for some, we need to improve upon them so that we enhance investor climate. Registering business, paying taxes, and many other things are very critical. Then also labor. We want to minimize labor agitations. We are not in normal times. We want to encourage labor to be circumspect in asking for higher wages. That can deter entrepreneurs, that can deter potential investors because we are not in normal times. Of course, we need to adjust for cost of living differences when we are asking for higher wages, but we ought to be very circumspect in making demands on entrepreneurs.
All right, Professor Peter Quarter, we're so grateful for your input here. Here's the Director Economist at ISA, helping us understand the entire perspective, putting into context Ghana's growth of 0.4% GDP in 2020. Away from that, President Akufo-Addo has released the list of Deputy Finance Minister nominees, with Charles Edubuahin, a former Deputy Finance Minister, elevated to the position of Minister of State at the Finance Ministry. Earlier reports had stated that the decision to make the chemical engineer turned investor banker a Minister of State is strategic to assist the country's fight to rebuild her economy after the impacts of COVID-19. Of course, here are some infographics we put together for you to help you appreciate the names, of course, of all the deputy ministers being slated for their positions by the president. Of course, you can see on the screens there, Charles Edubuahin, Minister of State at the Ministry of Finance, and elevation, that is. Also, we do have Honorable Abnal Asare for Deputy Minister of Finance. She's been maintained, actually, together with a new entrant, the former CEO of the National Entrepreneurship Innovation Program, Honorable John Pontuma Kuma, that's Honorable Kuma there, as Deputy Finance Minister. When it comes to trade, we have some other new entrants as well. With energy, you can see the list there, Honorable Mohammed Amin Adam, Honorable William Oreku Edu, and the list goes on with the local government as well. When it comes to food and agriculture, we have some new entrants together with that of education, with John Intimfojo and Gifted Chum Ampofo as well. And the list goes on. If you take a look at the Land and Natural Resources Ministry, we had Benita Owusu-Bio as well as George Miraku as well. With transport and road and highways, you could also see the list of deputy ministers there. What's going to happen is that in the course of the week, we should be expecting, if not months, we should be expecting some vetting of these enlisted personalities who are going to be taking their roles in the various respective ministries of state. So we shall be keeping an eye on the appointment and the nominees and the vetting as well to give you updates as and when we do have them. Meanwhile, the energy expert Ben Boachi has called on politicians to detach partisan politics from executing plans and appointing heads of public institutions when voted into power. According to him, the appointee may not sanction or dismiss the appointed due to their political affiliation. He says it is time that government see public agencies and businesses and allow appointees to function without persistent interference. He spoke on Talking Business on Joy Prime with Inshirado.
I think the bottom line is the politics, because politicians appoint and they are supposed to disappoint. Okay, so if somebody is not delivering and you can clearly show that the technical person is not delivering, you just need to bring in somebody else who can actually deliver. But because of the persistent interference in the way these institutions function and work, they are not even able to call the shots when they have to, all right? Because it is about, going in there for one procurement or the other. And that also gives these civil servants and engineers the room to also underperform, because ultimately you cannot hold them accountable for how they function. So we have, curtailed the accountability structure such that, the appointee cannot hold the appointed accountable. So it's a problem with the politics. We need to see these sector agencies running as businesses. If you cannot have ECG running as a business, you cannot have VRA running as a business, you cannot have RICO running as a business, we can't fix these problems. Because for the consumer, all you care is that there is power in your home or your business, right? So until we are able to separate the politics from the proper functioning of these institutions, we're not going to be able to deliver that. So we need to really have a conversation about how do we separate the politics from business to allow them to run as such.
Is talking up a lot about industrialization. Doesn't that create some sort of an oxymoronic situation where on one hand we have aspirations of being industrialized and on the other hand we're not putting in what it takes to ensure that we're able to do that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a complex, situation. The language doesn't fit the reality, right? If you want to industrialize, you first of all have to reach global space. What you want to produce in Ghana is being produced in China, in Togo, in Europe, in Cote d'Ivoire, everywhere in the world. You are at competition with those people, and therefore your strategy and your cost competitiveness should be paramount in deciding the trajectory you want to go.
Well, you're still watching The Marketplace. The German Corporation and Ministry of Trade and Industry have entered into a new agreement to develop some industrial parks across the country. The move also seeks to support the growing automobile industry. The head of Special Initiative on Training and Job Creation at GIZ Ghana, Gerald Jokowski, spoke to Joy Business after a short ceremony to sign the agreement and also presented two locally assembled VW vehicles to the ministry for its operations.
Yes, in general, we believe that the backbone of the economy and the development of countries is the private sector. So, of course, we need governments to ensure regulations in place that are favorable. But the development of a country, the development of jobs, job creation, private sector is the backbone. And we see that Ghana is putting a big emphasis on this. With rules and regulations, engaging strongly in the African continental free trade area, and therefore we are supporting Ghana and trying to develop our partnership. We want matching between European companies and Ghanaian companies. So we have also programs in this direction. We want Ghanaian companies to get into value chains of European companies. We are providing them with expert advice on how to approach a European market, for example. And therefore we are in this cooperation with the Ministry of Trade and Industry. And what is extremely valuable for us is that the Ministry of Trade and Industry designs a lot of policies that are extremely favorable with respect to this development, and therefore it's our natural partner to work with, and we are trying to support them with this respect.
Let's now hear from the Trade and Industry Minister, Alan Tremantin, who expressed confidence that the cooperation between the two parties, that's Germany and Ghana, will transform the automotive industry and attract more German investors into the Industrial Park initiative.
But industrial parks would also help provide access to dedicated service lands, which would have access to energy, water, and other infrastructure facilities, which supports industrialization. So these two components of the special initiative will be absolutely critical in helping us to achieve and realize the objectives of our industrial transformation agenda. So I hope that this will only be the beginning. The other components of the transformation program, which I'm very sure Germany can help Ghana with, the pharmaceutical industry, the development of the petrochemical industry, the integrated aluminium and bauxite industry, the iron and steel industry, and the establishment of a factory or facility that will produce machinery and equipment, which will support our industrialization agenda.
Well, the International Labour Organization, in partnership with some other agencies, has organized a 3-day fundraising workshop to equip partners on how to raise funds for sustaining competitive and responsible enterprises. There is more in this report.
Sustaining Competitive and Responsible Enterprises (SCORE) is an International Labour Organization global program that seeks to improve productivity and working conditions in small and medium enterprises. The key intervention of the global program is a training intervention which combines practical classroom sessions with in-factory consulting. Speaking on the sidelines of the workshop, National Program Coordinator for SCORE, Samuel Esiedu, says the workshop is to help build capacities of investors to access resources to support the training of SMEs. According to him, ILO will no longer fund the program because SCORE is at phase 3.
Unfortunately, in Ghana, our interest in training is on the lower side. Many enterprises do not have budget for training. They don't even have it on their plans. But at SCORE, we and good training that would improve upon the competitiveness, the productivity, and quality of enterprises. The ILO still has a lot of projects in Ghana. As we speak, there is a project. We have a project on scale up, but projects run a phase. We have had the first phase. It started in 2011, so we have had the first phase, the second phase, and the third phase. And naturally there is donor fatigue, but we have structures in place to sustain the implementation.
Head of Research and Consultancy at the Institute of Bankers, Professor Samuel Lati, has advised businesses to pay keen attention to human resource, as it is one of the key determinants of the success or failure of any business.
I knew for sure that once I was coming to present, my constituency will be expecting me to be talking about donor funding, Ministry of so and so, JICA, talk about USA. I know. But I just want to that before we even get there, let's ask ourselves, how are we doing ourselves with what we already have? Just a reminding session. So I was saying that we should look at our profit activities. We should look at our loss activities. Identify profit and loss activities. I just explained it by saying that whatever will feed your company is a profit activity. Feed.
Well, the Asante-Hene Otumfuo Setutu II has urged members of the Institute of Chartered Accountants Ghana to uphold truth and due diligence in the discharge of the duties. He says Ghana's economic development and the protection of the public purse rests on the professional ideals of accountants. The Asante-Hene said this when the leadership of the ICAG paid a courtesy call on him. Prince Apia has more in this report.
The delegation from the Institute of Chartered Accountants Ghana visited the Menchia Palace to invite the Asante-Hene for their upcoming conference to be held in Kumasi. The Asante-Hene commended the association for their professionalism in Ghana's economic development. Otumfuo Setutu II also urged the chartered accountant to be truthful and diligent to their duties, since it plays a critical role in protecting the public purse.
Every accountant should be bold in standing firm for the truth, even if it costs you your job. And this is the way forward for us.
na no never ma adwuma no ayeye amenyina be nyina ye ne ana etaye so so ne nyina wo si ehunu kwan de befa so. So if
the government's revenue and finances shall flourish, we must engage accountants on the steps to take in order to help develop our nation.
Revenue aye kan nyina be ye wo se enom dinkuta ho. No mo so etimi a kire kwan e fa so betumi aboa ma ntoboa na ba na ye de aye man yiye.
Professor Williams Atulik is president of ICAG.
We are here this morning first to put before you our desire to hold the annual accountants conference, which will be between 22nd of May to the 28th of May in your territory. And we want to request your kindness to grant us permission to hold a conference here. And secondly, to seek the privilege of having you grace the occasion when we are here. This is our mission, Your Royal Majesty.
Meanwhile, ICAG donated 20,000 cedis to support the work of the Otumfuo Educational Fund. Prince Apia reporting.
And on that note, we end Marketplace. My name is Charles Ayete. Many thanks for being a part. For more news, you log on to myjoyonline.com. Have a good afternoon.